So on that note, as we continue to be subjected to crippling power outages, government and the private sector are forced to think out of the box and rethink energy consumption and how energy is generated and stored. One analyst believes that the most efficient and environmentally friendly power storage model is pumped hydro storage. Well, Volker von Widdern, head of strategic risk practice at Riskonet Afrika, joins me now to expand further on this. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. Localized hydro pump storage solutions. You say this could perhaps be the answer, but perhaps before we get to the hows and the whys, let's start off with some clarity on what this process really is and what it entails.
What it entails is the utilization of energy when it's underutilized, or such as solar during the day on households and many other areas where batteries are full during the day, to pump water up into any kind of water tower, and then one releases the water in the early evenings when there's a high demand, or the early mornings when there's a higher demand. So that's the first issue. The second one is that there's a constraint about transmission lines and many issues like that, where localized pumped hydro storage can be built anywhere within a metro environment. So you can use existing transmission facilities and you don't have to be dependent on another couple of years of transmission investment.
So why is this a good idea, especially looking at the impact on efficiency and what it does for the environment? It's
a good idea because pumped hydro storage is the most environmentally friendly and long-term lowest cost of storage that is available. So I think what we forget is that when you mine rare earths, there's a huge environmental footprint, and the batteries that we are now producing in their millions will create a massive future environmental problem for us. Where, it'll be interesting when one compares that to nuclear, which is going to be worse. I haven't got an opinion on it, but I just think that one should consider that. Pumped hydro storage only has a footprint in terms of the steel and concrete that's used to build it, and then that lasts for 50 or 100 years. So the environmental footprint of that is tiny compared to the alternative measures. And secondly, of course, one's storing water, which is very strategic and has a multiplier effect if you use the water, depending on how it's distributed into metropolitan areas. So it's environmentally friendly, has a long-lasting benefit, has a fixed cost, which is a low cost compared to batteries. You don't have to recycle a water tower every 7 years. It lasts 50 to 100 years. So it has significant benefits in the long term.
So when it comes to compatibility, how does it bode with the solar panels?
What happens is the solar panels are the feed, so they would generate power during the day, and that would then drive the pumps that then push the water up into a water tower, and then the same system is used. Then just run the water down again, and then the same energy that's used to pump up is then turned around, and the turbine then generates energy on the way down. And you'd have, let's say, a parallel reservoir at the bottom, and you'd have a multiple range of towers around the reservoir, and you would then effectively have a big battery. And you'd use solar power to pump water up when you need it, and you'd run the water out when you need the power.
So what needs to change when it comes to regulation to ensure that this process can indeed...
Yeah. That's the critical thing. So we're all allowed now to generate our own power, but what this needs is an agreement that we can generate power across multiple locations, whether they are 1,000 households or 50 or 100 factories or whatever it may be. And that power would be aggregated, because that's where it becomes much more efficient, into this water storage environment. And then you would have effectively store your power in the form of water towers, and you would then do so. So at the moment, the regulations do not permit multiple locations to share power across each other. It's very simple to see how this fits into load shedding, because this is all happening behind the load shedding infrastructure. So we would still respect whatever load shedding is being implemented. And it's exactly the same as having an inverter at home or a diesel generator at a factory. This just is another independent source of power at the factory that's beyond the Eskom power. So that regulation should be really simple to change, but unfortunately it is something that is under the control of local authorities and Eskom, and it's been quite cumbersome up to now. those kind of changes. Yeah.
It sounds good in theory. I mean, it sounds like a fantastic idea. What is it going to take when it comes to the costs involved and the strategy around it?
What it takes is the willingness of, let's say, the receiver. So let's say we have a shopping center, a small industrial node, a company that needs a lot of power and the generator isn't strong enough to kickstart the factory, and they want longer production runs. You just need an off-take agreement and then the neighboring sites in which to pilot the solar power and, of course, to build the water tower. Now, these things are very simple and easy to build. So I imagine it would take, then, of course, your building regulations might take 1 month or 1 year. But assuming you can get the building regulations done and you build the tower within about a year, you've got the power, you've got the solar already installed, and there are many, many generators and turbines that can be installed very quickly. So it should be a fairly practical process as long as there's alignment with these people. And the offtake should be fairly straightforward because many, many factories would love to have consistent power and maintain employment and grow their businesses on more consistent power in this way.
And very lastly, why do you think that it hasn't, this process, this hydro storage, hasn't been one that could be considered to some of the problems that we're facing along power cuts and so forth? What could be at stake should this be considered?
Well, one of our difficulties in South Africa is that water and electricity have been too cheap to consider economic alternatives. And so it was always easy just to open the tap and expect water or, put in a plug and expect power. Where there had been a proper economic cost and efficiency models were run, pumped hydro storage was built in parallel to dams being built and to any major river system with a good height differential and so forth, because people were planning for 10, 20, 30 years and wanted to build the economic benefit of that through their medium to long-term planning. So when we had a surplus of power in the 80s, pumped hydro would have obviously been superfluous. However, that was an accident of other design. So we've lacked the planning over the last 10, 20, 30 years to demonstrate that we could overcome the challenges of solar by putting in pumped hydro storage in parallel with solar and simply inverting the equation and saying, if we bring pumped hydro storage into the cities, we solve both a water storage problem as well as an electricity storage problem. And that kind of planning has been absent up to now from what we can see.
Very evidently so. Thank you so much for your time. Let's perhaps leave it there for now. Volker von Widdern, Head of Strategic Risk Practice at Riskonet Afrika.